recording? I can't even remember, but let me itch my ankle first. Oh, today's just a day. These pants, I think, have seen their last day, which isn't that just the worst when you love an article of clothing and it's just dying on you. So yes, the pants and the hair, which I had a meeting this morning and I figured, okay, all I have is the meeting. I don't have to work. So I didn't do anything. I just got dressed and brushed my hair, and then I went and picked up my car only to get a phone call saying, hey, can you come to work? And so, I mean, it's really not that bad. But today's just not my finest day. What will make this day so much better is reviewing Gayle Forman's Just One Day. If you have been keeping up with me, you'll know this has been a very busy, spoiled month. I kicked off with the LUNAR Chronicles, and oh my goodness, that took it out of me. When I did Harry Potter, I guess I must have gotten a bigger head start, or else I had more time to actually listen to the books. So even though I got 7 done versus the 5 for the LUNAR Chronicles, is it 5? Is it 4? 5. Yes, 5. And then I had planned on doing a total of 7, only to realize it was not going to happen. So I cut Heartless and Gilded. But anyways, I cut it to the wire. And this is actually pretty live considering how far in advance I usually do my reviews. So if today is Friday for you, it is Wednesday for me, which means I finished Just One Day yesterday. And then today I was planning on finishing Just One Year. And then tomorrow I was planning on finishing Just One Night. However, I got called into work today, which means this review, which was supposed to happen earlier today, and I was supposed to spend the rest of the day on Just One Year so that I could finish that and record it tomorrow. And yeah, so basically everything got pushed back a day. So, oh my gosh, why do I do this to myself? Because there are not enough Fridays in a year, guys. I know you're not really out there, but I love doing this. And so I am a glutton for punishment, and I love reading, and I'm just going to keep bringing this to like the 5 people who actually watch my channel. All of that just going back to say I'm very, very excited about Just One Day because that is what February is all about. The books that I love. And when I was doing LUNAR Chronicles, I found I didn't love them as much as I remember loving them. I don't necessarily regret doing them, but I do wish they held the same charm as my first read through. And then I got into Just One Day, and I was about to hit my head against the wall and be like, Beth, you did it again. You started another series in which you have fonder memories than the reality is. But I ended up loving Just One Day as much as I'd hoped. And I don't know how many of you have read Just One Day or just the series. But what I love so much about it is how Just One Day is the girl's perspective and then Just One Year is the guy's perspective. And I enjoy when a writer does that because I like getting both sides of the story. And I like in particular how she's not just repeating the things that we already know. We're not seeing the exact same events throughout the book just from alternate points of view. We are seeing some connective events that ground us, but then we're seeing that ensuing year that shows us what these characters have been doing. I know I'm a little ahead of myself because I haven't even talked about Just One Day yet, but I enjoy this series because I'm just nosy. And I really like to see how the different characters view things and then what they get up to in each other's absence. As for Just One Day, it revolves around a recent high school grad named Allison Healy, whose parents have set her up on a European trip with her best friend Melanie. However, Allison's just not digging it. And then on one of the last days there, her tour group is supposed to go watch the Royal Shakespeare Company perform a Shakespeare play. and she and Melanie skip it in favor of watching kind of an underground production of something that I should know, Twelfth Night. At the end of this production, Allison is thrown a coin by the really, really attractive guy, and she's basically smitten. However, she and Melanie are going to go spend an extra day in London. And as they are going from one location to another, who happens to be on their train but that really attractive guy, Willem? And I'm just going to pause here for a moment because I've been learning Dutch, and so anything that has to do with the Dutch culture, I'm just like, oh my gosh. And so I enjoyed the elements, the Dutch elements in this book. And on that note, the audiobook is really well done. There are a lot of accents that have to be made in this book, and I thought the narrator did a really, really good job. However, and I'm not a Dutch expert, I know someone who is a Dutch expert, so I really need to ask him, but I'm pretty sure that when you put the vowels U and I together, it makes the ow sound. So mouse, M-U-I-S. It's not muis, which is what I thought it was when I first started learning Dutch. It's mouse. It's not huis, H-U-I-S. It's house. So Willem, his name is Willem, which is actually W-I-L-L-E-M. So it's the Dutch form of William. So Willem de Ruiter. So R-U-I-T-E-R. However, the narrator in both this book and Just One Year, which are different narrators because this is girl, that is guy, they both pronounce it Willem de Ruiter. So I need to ask my Dutch expert, which one's correct? Like, are there certain instances in which UI is not pronounced ow? But so that's one thing. Like, there are little things where I was like, I don't think that's how that's pronounced. But I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to be like, I'm a better Dutch speaker than you! When I'm really not. Maar ja, ik spreek een beetje Nederlands, so ik ken geel. Ja? Oh, veel? I can never remember which one means much, geel or veel. Allison runs into Willem on the train, and they connect, and she expresses to him her regret that her tour group had not been able to go to Paris. And so he's like, you know what? Why don't we go to Paris? So Melanie heads on to London, and Allison, who he has named Lulu because her new haircut reminds him of the silent film star Louise Brooks, Lulu and Willem spend this magical day in Paris, only for her to wake up the next morning and find him gone. And she absolutely freaks out. And then she spends, like, basically the next school year in this funk. And, well, not even the next school year. We kind of get glimpses into various months of her school year in which she basically is suffering from this severe depression, which I'm not quite sold on, but we'll get to that. She's flunking her classes because she's supposed to be pre-med, which is one more thing. I'm like, what? And so she's flunking all of her classes, and she's getting in tons of trouble with her parents. And so she comes back after winter break, and her guidance counselor's like, why don't you come see me? And they decide that maybe Allison should ease up on the pre-med courses, and she takes a Shakespeare and literature class, or Shakespeare out loud. In this class, she meets this guy named D, and D is very flamboyant, and he's another character I really need to discuss, but they form this friendship that sort of brings Allison out of her shell. And then through this, she eventually divulges what had happened between her and Willem. This then gets her roommates involved, and she decides she's gonna try to find Willem. But that requires money. Her parents absolutely flip out. I don't really understand why. I've been meaning to ask my own parents how they would have responded, but honestly, I get the disappointment that, one, she'd been lying to them about the fact that she dropped all these classes, and two, that she was on this other kind of educational course. But if they were supportive enough to think, okay, she's going to take a school trip overseas and we'll pay for it, why are they so against her kind of doing her own thing by going overseas? I mean, I know they're vastly different, but I did think it was a little hypocritical. And then, because she's gonna go to Paris, because this is kind of her link to Willem, she decides to take French classes, and they're against paying for her French classes. So she's been taking Mandarin, which they're okay with, but they're not okay with her also learning French. Eventually they do come around to certain things, but because initially they don't, which also includes shutting off her cell phone service and locking her out of the internet, I mean, really? Talk about excessive. She gets a job as a dishwasher, and she ends up also taking a beginner's French class, which, holy cow, guys, if I'm ever in a beginner's anything class like that, I don't know what I will do with myself, because the teacher walks in on day one and will not speak a lick of English. And I see the validity of her method, but I'm like, couldn't you give me a week? Because it's like dunking me into cold water. She takes this French class, she gets a job, she's saving up, she's doing really great. She and Melanie have kind of gone ways, which I also have thoughts on and we'll talk about. But then the day comes for her to go to France, and it's just incredible. I love this book so much, I think, because I see myself in Allison. She's really, really boring in the beginning. And then there's a lot of her I don't actually understand up to the point where she goes to France, but then she gets there. And that's when I'm like, this is the person I want to be. I want to emulate Allison. Like, how in the world can I get to that point? Even now, at my ripe old age, I'm still like, how in the world can I be like Allison? I want to travel. So yeah, she gets to France, and she gets to her hostel, and automatically she runs across a group of Australians, and she's like, I just gotta go for it. And that's sort of her mantra. So yeah, she hangs out with them, but then she takes her own time to track Willem down. And at some point, the Australians are like, you know what, if you don't really want to hang out with us, that's fine, just let us know. She says, it's not that. I'm on a quest. I'm trying to find this dude. So, like, we're gonna help you. Eventually, she does find Willem. And I really, really enjoy the way this book ends. If you don't know anything about these books, they are very open-ended, which is where Just When Night comes in, because it kind of cements all the stuff that we're hoping will happen, but we really have no idea will happen. And so there's kind of two endings to this novel. And I sort of love the idea, not even sort of, I love the idea of the first ending, because it doesn't perpetuate the idea that finding the guy is what we females need to be happy, to say, yes, you've reached the apex, you've climbed your Everest. So what I'm talking about is, it's all kind of by happenstance. All the ends that she is pursuing, trying to find Willem, kind of go nowhere. And she is thinking, all right, well, that's it. Like, I'm just gonna have to be happy with what I found out, that maybe he didn't abandon me at this artist squat, but something happened to him, and that's that. But she ends up at another showing of 12th Night, and she's like, she just knows that Willem is gonna be there, and he does. He ends up being Sebastian, the lead guy. So the play ends, and she realizes that the guys sitting next to her are his friends. And so she decides she's gonna go up and speak to Willem. only to witness him being greeted by another girl, and it's obvious that there's something between these two, that the love that she thought she felt pouring out of him during his performance, it was there, but it wasn't for her, it was for this other girl. So she's like, all right, I guess that's, I'm happy for him. Like, is it the outcome I wanted? Not really, but sometimes that's how it is. So I enjoy, like, you do have a feeling of unresolution, but for me, I kind of like it because it's Allison who is so meek and so boring and so lacking in self. So we start with her and we come all the way to this Allison who's like, this is the dude who kind of made me miserable, who sent me into a spiral, and then I've obsessed and then sought after for this intervening year. And you know what? Like, I'm cool. Like, it's a great message. And so from that moment, she says, okay, I guess I'm just going to spend the rest of my time experiencing something else, only for kismet to lead her back to his door. And we end with her on his doorstep, him opening the door and her going inside. I love it because, again, there's a resolution, but there's also so much possibility. Like, the reader's mind, the reader's imagination can go wild. Like, you can make anything happen from that point on. As much as we love a concrete ending, I enjoy the fact that not only did she say, I've come to my end and I'm satisfied with what I found, but then we also get she did find him, and they meet back up, or they come face to face, and he doesn't reject her. Let me first talk about why I wasn't sure I was going to like this book at first. And it's because there are some fundamental aspects of this book that have never quite sat well with me, that I've never understood. And one of them is her friendship with Melanie. In high school, Allison and Melanie were kind of smart girls. And then they go on this summer trip, and Melanie just does a 180 and becomes this party girl who drinks and makes out and is super rebellious, while Allison just goes and sits in her room. And so I didn't understand that relationship, but I thought it highlighted kind of how boring Allison was. And I couldn't really understand why she was so boring. I understand some situations, not our scene, but I was like, you only gave going out and hanging out with these people a chance once. And so, yeah, she would just make these decisions. And then she, at one point, she and Willem are talking about their virginity, and she admits that she's not a virgin. And this is just one more thing where it doesn't quite line up with my idea of her character, because she's so meek and so rule-abiding that I still find it really hard to believe that she would take that leap. I mean, I know good girls can have sex. That's not my point. My point is, I kind of expect her to be a little too scared to do that, because even though we don't get a picture of her parents' feelings about their teenage daughter having sex, I get the feeling they wouldn't approve. And her whole life is about being a good girl, about doing what her parents want her to do, about following a set path. And so there's just all these little things that I've never quite cottoned onto. And then now I'm coming to them again, and I'm just like, oh great, it's going to be even worse, because now my writer's brain is going to be picking everything apart, which I'm trying to stop. I really am. But what was beautiful about this book was all those little things that I was like, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. Why would they behave like this? Why would she think like that? Why would this happen? By the end of the novel, Forman completely explained everything. She went over everything. She transitioned everything. And I loved that, because there's so many times that I feel like writers will just put stuff in there for a shock factor or for whatever. but then never resolve it. Never make it part of the characterization. And so I really enjoyed how, even though I came into it and all these things were just jumping out at me, screaming at me, I was just like, by the end, I'm glad they were there. Like, her parents, as I said, these people control freaks. Maybe I didn't say that. I meant to say that. What I did say was I wanted to talk about her parents. And so I think it's ludicrous how hands-on these people are. Her mother, I can't even. Is this really how mothers can be? I know my parents kept tabs on me, but my mom didn't expect me to call her every day when I was in college. Like, if I didn't answer the phone, she didn't go call my roommate. You know, she wasn't coming to my dorm and saying, oh, you didn't decorate, and then decorate in my absence. I mean, this woman. And it comes to the revelation, because her mom, you know, as I said, her grades had tanked. And so then towards the end of the semester, after she's been lying to them about the fact that she dropped classes and is doing different stuff, her mom is like, okay, well, I lined up an internship for you at these medicinal companies. And Allison has been dragging her feet about answering whether or which internship she'll do, because she wants to wait till she gets her grades in to then be like, hey, look, this is what's going on. So anyways, she and her family are Jewish, and they're having their Seder, and the grandma's like, so Allison, what are you going to do this summer? And her mom's like, oh, she's going to intern here. And she's like, no, I'm not. And so there's this huge blow up, and it's like her mother cannot stomach the fact that Allison did something on her own, like of her own volition, that as a freshman in college, she decided to take some classes that would help her pass. And then it goes further into that, where, as I mentioned, they took her phone away. They locked her out of the internet. Like, they restricted everything about her life. They did not support her desire to take French classes. They didn't support her desire to go traveling, which I can understand that. Like, that's a big deal, especially since she's, 19? We have all these things, and my brain is just like, this woman. And even kind of the dad, although I didn't understand the dad so much, because sometimes I felt like he was supportive of Allison and sort of the antithesis of her mother. And then other times it was like, well, we're on the same page. And I didn't even know they were on the same page until they were both angry at Allison. The whole time I'm just like, oh my gosh, this mother, could we please tone it down a little bit? Only for it to come about that she's trying to live vicariously through Allison. And all of Allison's feelings of not being good enough, of having to carry the weight of all the children that her parents couldn't have, are actually false. And her pulling away from her parents is what's setting her mother off, because her mother is feeling like now she's irrelevant. You go from hating this woman to feeling sorry for her. And she and Allison, I've seen this little clip about the Cosby Show where Malcolm Jamal Warner is talking about this one scene in which Cliff is talking to Theo, and there's a moment where in any normal sitcom, any previous sitcom, it'd be like, oh, you know, the audience is gonna, oh, and then they're gonna tie it up and move on. And Cliff is like, sit your butt down there, you know, whatever. Like, he puts him in his place. He's like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Back to the point. So she and Allison are having this moment in which you think, oh, now it's time for the audience to go, oh, and then we're gonna tie it up and move on. And it's really not like that. It's kind of like, look, this is just how it's gonna be, and I'd like it if you would go on this journey with me rather than trying to control me. And so things aren't perfect, but they're resolved. Speaking of resolutions, Melanie, I know what she's supposed to represent. Sorry, I feel like I have a toupee. When I do this, I feel like Trump. Do I look like Trump? Anyways, Melanie is someone that I understand what she's supposed to represent. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's just gonna be what it is. She's supposed to represent kind of that disbanding of childhood and what every college kid is supposed to be, and the testing of limits and the figuring out who you're supposed to be. What I eventually came to terms with about why Melanie bothered me so much was I wished I'd gotten more of them as friends before I got into them as drifting apart. Because we jump into this book with Melanie already being Mel 2.0, and she's putting all these demands on Allison to leave behind the friendship that they formed. And like I'd said earlier, like just like that, she just turned her on a dime and became a completely different person. And so I wished I'd seen more of them as friends, more of them growing apart before Mel all of a sudden was this completely different person before I even got to know who she was before that. For me, that would have had more impact. For me, it would have hurt more to see Allison losing kind of her only friend, but basically her best friend. And I don't know. I mean, I had a really big issue with Melanie in terms of whenever Allison would go to visit her. I mean, first off, I'm like, why are you clinging to this, okay? But every time Allison would see her, she was completely different. And it bothered me because it felt like she was trying too hard. I know we're trying to squeeze a lot into a little, okay? I do, but I wished that it would have had a more natural progression rather than her feeling super flighty and flippant about all of her choices, about who she wants to be. It's like every quarter of the semester of college, she was somebody different. And I'm like, is that, I don't know. I'm gonna jump off that negative train and go to D. I really enjoy D. He is a color character and he's super sassy and super funny. But Allison, she has a lot of work to do on herself, a lot of growth to experience. And so when she meets him, I'm confused about him. I know there's this theme throughout the book of people not being who they seem. And so that's D in a nutshell, is every person that he's introduced to in Allison's life, he sort of molds himself to the image that person wants him to be. But I wish that I could have seen a little bit of more of who he really was. What happens is Allison, as I said, has a lot of work to do on herself. And she hasn't told her parents about her change of subjects. For some reason, she doesn't tell D any of this. And then they come to visit. And she lies to D about what she's doing that weekend, which I don't understand why she has to lie about that. Why can't she just say her parents are coming to town? And then D learns the truth from the roommate, who I guess just says that Allison's parents are in town. So then he shows up at her dorm looking completely normal, acting completely normal. And then after everything's said and done, he is super offensive about her lying to him, and eventually he passes it off as, well, I just don't like being lied to. I'm like, you don't even know the girl. She doesn't even know you. All you do is you get together and you study. This is before she opened up to him about what happened with Willem and then them setting up this quest. And so I thought it was a little bit ridiculous. And yeah, he does own his behavior, but I was just like, he was a kind of a caricature at certain points, and I wish that I could have seen the real D every now and again, or at least, like, I'm assuming the real D was the guy that she would just kind of hang out with in the downtime after they finished their classwork, but we didn't actually see any of that. We were just told, this is the routine that we got into, and then all of a sudden they're no longer friends because she didn't tell him that she was gonna hang out with her parents that weekend, and he's like, oh, you're just ashamed of me? That's a huge leap. But whatever, in the end, he was a great friend, and I much preferred him to Mel, or Melanie, or whatever you want to call her. At the end, Melanie and Allison kind of reconcile. We're given the impression that maybe they'll be on speaking terms, but they'll never be who they once were as friends. Which I'm kind of fine with, because I didn't like Melanie. I wish Allison would have been like, you know what? You need to shut your mouth. You keep talking about how reliable and dependable I am and how you can always trust me to behave the same way and do this and do that. Yet when I do something different, you get mad at me, even though you've been getting mad at me this whole book because I don't act differently. I thought Melanie was a bit of a stereotype, but we're gonna leave that there. This book will probably always hit home for me because I feel like this is sort of a representation of my life, which is why I think it'd be great for a lot of you, because I know so many of us, no matter how old we are, don't really feel like we belong. We don't quite know who we are or where we're going. And I enjoyed Allison's evolution. I enjoyed the backbone that she grew. I enjoyed the way that she found herself. But that reminds me, I did not enjoy the whole depressed state because I didn't understand it. I understand depression. I guess I don't understand what set her off onto such a dark and twisted spiral. Because, yes, it is devastating to feel used the way she felt. But eventually you move on. Unless it's supposed to be like, and this is an analogy she gives, where she hadn't realized she'd been in a room without a door until she found the door, and then all of a sudden the door wasn't there anymore. So I guess I see that. But it's kind of came a little too late. I wanted more of her trying, I guess. As I said, I understand the depression. I understand what motivated her inactivity, her inability to make friends. But I did think she could have been, sorry, my hair. Sorry. I did think she could have been a little bit more active in her own life, and just a little way. For me, the book, it doesn't pick up until she meets Dee and she starts getting ready to go to France. But honestly, I can't say that this book would have been nearly as successful without that first half. You have to kind of sink into all of this stuff with Allison in order for the rest of it to make an impact. That's basically it. I wish I were Allison, and I have started my own travel fund, so we'll see when that happens, how far that takes me. Yeah. If anybody knows a cute Dutch guy, this girl right here. I will see you tomorrow for just 1 year. Tootsie.